Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, January 5th. Looking at the significant wave height chart for the North Pacific, we see again no activity off the U.S. West Coast. Basically calm waters, no swell generation potential. A little bit of something, probably swell from another source pushing east off from Hawaii and north of that area. Then a little bit of a gale trying to organize in the Northwest Pacific. Was at 26-foot seas, but really nothing to get our particular attention. First stop on our tour, we'll take a look at the jet stream. The jet stream is what fuels storm development in lower levels of the atmosphere. So this is where we look to understand its configuration, wind strength, and speeds, and that helps us assess whether there's potential for storm or gale development lower down. So right now, currently, there's a nice pocket of wind pushing off Japan. Not nearly as organized, though, as what it's been in weeks past. This is 160 knot winds. The jet makes it to about the date line as it's been doing, and then it starts to fall apart, split a little bit with the northern track heading up into Alaska, the southern track here down into Baja, and then notice over here everything joins back together, and then this consolidated jet east towards the eastern U.S. coast and off into the North Atlantic is what's fueling storm development relative to Europe. So let's put this into motion, sort of see what's going on here. We go out 12, 24 hours. This is a little bit more standard what we've been seeing, a continuous flow of 150 knot winds pushing off Japan. A little bit of a trough trying to organize here. That supports counterclockwise rotation lower down in the atmosphere and helps fuel gale development. But this is not a particularly strong trough. In fact, it's kind of weak. But so let's just see how this plays out. Trough moves east and kind of moderates a little into Wednesday evening, and then a stronger pocket of wind energy starts developing late Thursday, early Friday. Notice you got another split starting to form in the jet here. So that pretty much shuts down storm development potential anywhere east of the split point. So we're at 170 east, so you're not even to the date line yet. We'll roll this out a little bit further. The split point starts moving to the date line. This is now the standard configuration that we've been seeing for 2 months now. 160 knot winds pushing off Japan, going flat to the date line, splitting, and then the split pattern from there. And notice the split pattern really supports clockwise circulation down at the surface and high pressure. Hence the blocking pattern that's been going on. High pressure locked over the entire U.S. West Coast, north of Hawaii even. No rain, all the storms tracking up north, and basically just nothing going on here. And all the storms that do form in the Pacific are way displaced to the west, and the resulting swell energy relative to the U.S. West Coast is coming from 2,600 nautical miles away, and Hawaii's a bit better situated, being closer to the date line. We'll roll this out. The same pattern holds, and you're into a week out, and it's the same old, a little bit stronger winds, 170 knot winds, split jet everywhere from just about the date line east. No real troughs, but it would seem that at some point one would form. The wind energy is good, supports gale development. We're just waiting for a trough to organize. Now we'll go down 30,000 feet straight down, surface level winds, surface level pressure, pretty much as we expected by looking at the jet stream. High pressure has a lock on what's going on in the East Pacific. There's 1024 millibar high, 1036 millibar here. So basically this is all locked down here, and there's even remnants hanging out this far. And there's the one low pressure system, not a particularly deep gale, 972 millibar with, 35 knot winds. That's good for some wind swell, maybe relative to Hawaii and even the U.S. West Coast. 13-second period swell, but not a whole lot else, maybe 14 seconds. We'll put this into motion. The gale persists into Monday, and you get here, there we go, 40 knot winds, looking a little bit better. So there's some hope and that's over a pretty good fetch area, the small area for the 40 knot, but Still just generally winds blowing for probably the better part of 800-900 miles, all aimed due east, so that you get something out of that. Put that into motion a little bit more. Oh, and let's go back and do one thing. So relative to Hawaii, there's a great circle pass. This is where swell has to travel. And you notice this wind is basically blowing perpendicular to those paths. So at best you'll see sideband energy flowing into Hawaii, where if you look at Northern California, the winds, the arrows are pointing basically right up these lines into Central California. And if it weren't for the islands, Channel Islands off Southern California, they'd even see a little bit of it too, but it really cuts down the swell energy trying to navigate through that minefield. Anyway, we'll put this into motion, and you see additional energy trying to gurgle up. This is 54 hours out, but nothing really happens. It's just weak transitory little bits of 35 knot fetch. Then you're into 96 hours. Here's something a little bit better, 40 knot winds. But again, 45 for a second there, but very fleeting. Big dome of high pressure here, setting up. You know, I'm looking for a real storm. Here's another one of these little, you got 45 knot winds over an extremely small area, lifting northeast, and just really not doing a whole lot. Oh, and notice this, big high pressure sets up. This is into a week out, early next Monday. Actually, when does that form? It starts forming out here. We're into next weekend, and so that just looks like more of the same, the high pressure lockdown. Now here's one other little interesting point though relative to the Pacific Northwest starting, well, this is Wednesday, we'll go back even further. Notice all these systems, they're kind of tracking, they do get a hole, the high pressure breaks down enough and they're able to track into the Pacific Northwest. We'll put that into motion. You see wind, the inference is that there's water associated with these systems too. More moving in, we're into Saturday, Sunday, so that's good, but none of them make it into California. And then here comes the high pressure again that's basically going to close the storm door even to the Pacific Northwest and reinforce the drought that's gripping the U.S. West Coast. Now let's take a look at significant wave heights. These are the seas or waves, if you will, that are generated by the winds that are blowing over the open ocean. As we noticed, there was a little gale out here towards the dateline, 26-foot seas. This energy, again, all aimed up into U.S. West Coast rather than Hawaii. But the issue is you're 3,000 nautical miles away, so there'll be piles of swell decay before that swell ever arrives here. Hawaii's a bit closer, but not on the path, so either way it's a wash. Small swell, both locations. Put this into motion. The gale continues to evolve. 30-foot seas by Monday night. That's better. That's potential for 17-second period swell. Not so much aimed at Hawaii, but some sideband, and again the same deal with California. But the distance factor for California is the problem, and has been the problem all this season so far. Anyway, then you get into the middle of next week. Really not a whole lot going on. These little spurious bits of 20-foot seas, but nothing to really get your eyes open or notice anything. But you notice the trend is, just like we talked about storms and moisture moving into the Pacific Northwest, the energy seems to be flowing that way as well. We're into next weekend already, and so you got 26-foot seas next Sunday projected off of British Columbia, tiny little fetch, and a little bit better, what's that, 36, 37-foot seas on the dateline, but that's nearly a week out. Models are not believable that far out, but it's something to sort of monitor. Put it into motion, that's it. What we're not seeing is any large weather systems, no significant class storms, and no even real sign of solid activity pushing into the U.S. West Coast. This little bit of a aberration for about 5 days of some storm or fetch in the Gulf is a good sign, but we need a lot more than this. So that kind of begs the question, well, okay, if nothing's happening of any real interest for the next week, is there hope further out? And that drives us to look at weather features that drive long-term trends like the Madden-Julian Oscillation and El Nino and La Nina. First thing we look at, Southern Oscillation Index, daily numbers. This is the difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin, Australia. If the numbers are negative, like really negative, like -20 for prolonged periods of time, that suggests a strong pulse of the active phase of the MJO, if not perhaps the beginning of El Nino. And as everyone knows by now, those tend to enhance storm development in the North Pacific during winter months. As of right now, the daily average is just about neutral, nearly zero, -2.73. The 30-day running average is just about zero. At least it's better than it was in December, where it was actually positive, and that was the inactive phase of the MJO and actively suppressing storm development. And the 90-day running average is also basically neutral at about 2. So no real obvious hope here. Let's go look at some other indicators. Next up, we look for surface level wind anomalies. These are not absolute wind speeds or directions, but the variation from normal for this time of year. What you see is basically nothing going on, and on the equator. On the equator, basically nothing's going on. Looks like neutral wind anomalies, and we only want to go maybe 5 degrees either side of the equator, because this area here is what can set up Kelvin wave, westerly wind bursts that help push warm water, typically pulled up in the West Pacific towards the East Pacific, and that's what gets you El Nino. As of right now, nothing going on, dead neutral. Let's look towards the Central Pacific, same deal, neutral pattern. Next, let's take a look of the same thing a week out. It's interesting because a few days ago there was actually indications of a westerly wind burst trying to set up here. That is, westerly anomalies on the equator in the West Pacific, but that has pretty much vanished from the charts now. More a continuation of just a neutral wind pattern. And we look over to the East Pacific, same deal, neutral winds. But it's better than easterly winds, so both what we've looked at here, wind data and the SOI data, all tends to suggest pure neutral pattern going on right now. Next, let's take a look at some models that depict the outgoing long wave radiation, which in effect helps us see the same thing. Is there a tendency towards the active or inactive phase of the MJO to come into play? And of course, the active phase of the MJO tends to support storm development in the North Pacific during winter months. The blue suggests increased moisture in the atmosphere, less reflectivity off the ocean's surface, more clouds, and therefore the active phase of the MJO. What this model, the dynamic model, I'm sorry, this is the statistic model, is actually suggesting is a very weak inactive phase, active phase in place, and basically holding, maybe getting marginally stronger for the next 2 weeks, but nothing more. The dynamic model suggests much the same thing, but it hints at a stronger pattern about 2 weeks out building. And so that gives us a little bit of hope, something to look forward to. And in reality, all this is better than this orange or yellow if it were sitting over the date line. So basically the active phase of the MJO is somewhat in control over the West Pacific near the date line, expected to hold for the next 2 weeks, if not build some. So that's a hint of good news. And then to look yet further out, there's a upper level jet stream model that hints at much of the same. The green suggests the active phase of the MJO. Here we are as of right now, and yet says it's in place. And it's really a wave. It tends to move east and is supposed to be into South America by 25th of January. And notice here the inactive phase, which we previously looked at was holed up in the Indian Ocean, is to start moving into the West Pacific in about the 10th of January and start working its way across into early February. By mid-February, the inactive phase is gone and a new active phase starts building. But the general pattern, as it's been for 3 years now, is neither the inactive or the active phases are strong. They're all weak, and that doesn't impart much energy to the atmosphere, which in turn means the jet stream doesn't have a whole lot of power, which in turn means it gets about part way off Japan, as it historically does, and because it doesn't have power, it kind of just splits and heads north and supports high pressure down at the surface off the U.S. West Coast. So no immediate signs of drought relief, no immediate signs of swell either, just kind of this middling, muddling pattern going on. Next, we take a look at variations from normal in surface ocean water temperatures. The standard is warm water on the equator in the East Pacific suggests El Nino, colder than normal water in the East Pacific, La Nina. Historically speaking, or over this past summer, it's been a steady trickle of cold water radiating up off of Chile, Peru, Ecuador, tracking over the Galapagos. And so basically we've been in like this mini La Nina pattern, but that finally broke up in the September-October time frame, and now we've had this kind of warmer regime trying to get going. And what's particularly interesting is even warmer than normal waters off of Peru and Ecuador. Not much warm, anywhere from about a half a degree basically, but that's better than cold water. And it has been radiating west and has pretty much held. There's this little pocket of cooler water out here, but nothing really significant. So this again is kind of basically a neutral pattern, but biased a little bit on the warm side. We also had this major pool of warm water out between Japan and the U.S. West Coast. That's been there since summertime. It's going nowhere, which is kind of a good sign. And then you have this cool finger dropping down from California towards the equator. That's the result of our high pressure sitting here, or even inland a little bit, creating either north winds or northeast winds, creating a little bit of upwelling here, but nothing significant. Just enough to put a little finger of cool water in the map. And looking over here, Africa, again, kind of a warmish pattern, and this tends to be a mirror image of what's going on here. So the short of it is nothing really going on. No cold water, but no warm water either. No El Nino forming, but just kind of a neutral middling pattern going on. The expectation is at some point this is going to break and will move one way or the other, and the preference of course is for these waters to be warmer, but we're not seeing any signs of it just yet. Next we go look at subsurface water temperatures. This is the West Pacific here, 140 east, East Pacific 100, like off of Peru and Ecuador, and these are the absolute water temperatures. These are the anomalies. The differences from normal is what we're interested in. We've been watching this pocket here. This is actually a Kelvin wave, 2 degrees above normal. It started over here back in October, associated with a westerly wind burst on the surface in the West Pacific. A bunch of west winds pushed warm water to depth. It made the trek the whole way across the Pacific, equatorial Pacific, down at about 150 meters, which is standard for a Kelvin wave. It's now impacting the coast near Ecuador, North Peru, and we expect at some point these waters to start actually manifesting, like in the previous chart we saw, and start warming the waters near the Galapagos and actually gurgling back to the west as trade winds there get a hold of them. So we should see some warming off of Central South America, but we're not really seeing any of that yet. And finally, the model for water temperatures in the eastern equatorial Pacific. What we're seeing is basically a neutral pattern that's been going on all summer. And then the model suggests that by February, March, we should start seeing some increases in temperatures, getting up to about 0.6 degrees above normal by July into the fall of 2014. This had actually been up towards almost 1 degree, if not 0.9. Now it's fallen back down a little bit, but the trend per this model is generally in a direction that we'd like to see it. If you have warm water, again, in the Nino 3.4 region, that tends to help fuel the jet stream, and then the whole cascade of good things follows from that in the winter months. Again, though, this is a forecast. We really need to get through the spring unpredictability barrier, which is like March through May, if not into early June. And that's when we'll, if the model holds through that, then we maybe will start believing that some sort of a weak El Nino, or at least a weak warming trend, will develop. Finally, let's take a look at where all the action really is. North Atlantic. Megastorm, they call it a Hercules storm. It formed as a low-pressure system off the U.S. East Coast on Friday, pushed off the coast, built. It's pretty much peaked out as of 18Z on Sunday. This is 65-foot seas. You notice the high end of the scale is 52 here, and so you have to start picking through the individual contour lines on here, but trust me, if you go read them all, you're up to about 66 feet. All this is taking aim on Europe. So we'll watch this system evolve here. This is Friday, forming off the northeast coast, and by Saturday morning it's getting pretty solid. By Saturday evening we're quite strong into Sunday, and the 18Z will put this back. We'll do a little zoom here. We can actually count if you want to: 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66-foot sea heights. That is quite significant. And then we'll also do the Great Circle chart. Notice where they're all pushing right into Europe. Here's France. Good angle there. Even for that matter, Portugal. Less so for Morocco. But the other side of this is the core of the storm. If you look into the south end of Ireland, North France, so rather raw and stormy conditions more likely expected here. But large swell. With 66-foot seas, you're looking at a swell period in excess of 25 seconds, maybe in the early arriving swells 27, 28, maybe even 30 seconds. So a significant weather event, and we're not trying to hype it here because we don't do that, but it's rare. We have yet to see sea heights this high in a model in years, in a decade. So this is a significant storm. So look to see much reports of either damage or surf or both coming out of Europe. The swell's supposed to arrive on Monday into Tuesday. This whole area is going to get slammed, so that at least it's something to watch. And this is where all the energy is going on the planet right now, is in the Atlantic. It's been a machine over here for 3 months, and it probably won't be stopping anytime soon. This pattern is well dug in. So at least somebody's getting something somewhere. So it's fun to watch, fun to lurk, and see what other people are getting. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching our forecast. We enjoy doing it and hope you have too. Have a good week.